Hey guys, I have been asked to do an example with p-value, and I'm also going to do a confidence interval while we're in there, just so you can see how these are done if you've been struggling a little bit. Before we get to the problem, though, I want to review things you need to do this problem, because remember, it's not going to tell you to do these. So the very first thing you always want to do is state your hypothesis. Okay, your null and alternate. You want to write conditions. In context. Okay, do not forget that. Your conditions have to be in context. You have to state your p-value. Or confidence interval, depending on which one you're doing. I'm going to do both just so you can see. Or confidence interval. Okay, so by the way, these are two different methods of getting to the same answer. Okay, whether you use your p-value or your confidence interval doesn't matter. They're going to get you the same answer. I personally like to check both just to make sure I did it correctly, but I mean, it's up to you. Unless they tell you which one to use, you get to pick. And then you have to write conclusion. That conclusion requires a couple of different things. Your conclusion must state if you reject or retain. It must have your p-value or confidence interval. And it must be in context. Okay? Please put everything in context. Please, 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 please. So, in order to do these problems, this is what you have to have every single time. So make sure you know those. All right, so getting on with our problem. I just made this one up. It is not on any of your sheets, but you do them all the same. So it says, USA Today reported a study that stated that 78% of couples were planning to go out for Valentine's Day. You believe there are more couples that would prefer to stay at home. A random sample of 600 couples are surveyed, and 452 of them say they will be going out for Valentine's Day. Is this sufficient evidence to suggest that there will be less people going out than USA Today reported? So, following those steps that, like I said, are up here, but I'm going to have to go down here. The very first one is state your null and alternate. So my null hypothesis, which you must absolutely 100% write like this every single time, is your null colon p equals, in this case, it is 78%. That is my original. Okay. My alternate is I believe that there are more people that want to stay home, so I think that less than 78% people are going out. Okay. Null and alternate. Now, you have to put your conditions in context. So I'm going to write those out. I'm actually going to go on another sheet of paper because they're going to take a couple of lines. All right, so first condition. Sample of people are randomly selected, and couples are independent of each other. Okay, this meets my condition of being random and independent. Okay, so couples are randomly selected and the couples are independent. Next condition, remember each condition has to be listed in context. I need 10 times my sample size, so there are more than, I have 600 couples in the sample, so there are more than 6,000 couples in the U.S. I meet that. And the third one, I need 10 successes and 10 failures, so I need 10 couples going out and 10 couples staying in. Okay? So those are how I list my conditions in context. Has to be there. Next, I need my p-value. This is where your calculator comes in. So let's look. I'm going to stat test 5, the 1 proportion z-test. For this one, my null, excuse me, is 78%. I said that 452 people are going out of 600, but I believe it is less than that. So there's all my information. And I'm going to calculate. My p-value here is 0.0574. Okay, now deciding whether to reject or retain this. Remember, because it didn't give the alpha value, I'm going with 0.05. This is greater than 0.05, okay? When it is greater than, we retain, okay? So I'm going to be retaining my null. Let's go back and see what that means. I am retaining the null. I am saying that P is 0.78. So my conclusion for this would say, based on this sample, we retain the null hypothesis because our p-value of 0.0574 is greater than 0.05. Therefore, we cannot say that there are more people staying home than USA Today concluded. Okay, we cannot prove them wrong. Even though I thought that less than 78% were going out, my p-value says, nope, we are sticking with the null. That is just true. Now, the other way of doing this would be with a confidence interval. Now, let me tell you something. With a confidence interval, you have your 4 steps here. Oh, give me a second. Guys. All right. Sorry. So, the null and alternate stay the same. Okay, if I was doing confidence interval, this exact same problem with a confidence interval instead of a p-value. My null and alternate are the exact same. My conditions are the exact same. The only difference is, Sophia, stop please. Instead of listing a p-value this time, I'm going to list a confidence interval. So I want to show you guys what that's going to look like. I need another sheet of paper. Here we go. So if I did confidence interval instead of p-value, that would be stat test down to A, which is 1 proportion z interval. So remember, p-value was 1 proportion z test. Confidence interval is 1 proportion z interval. Now notice when you do this, Sophia! Shh. Notice when you do this, it actually copies all your information over for you. That is really cool. It makes it a lot easier. All that is still there. Your calculator just has that function that'll do that. So I'm going down to calculate. Now it gives me my confidence interval. I usually use 2 decimal places here. It's up to you. So my confidence interval says I am between 0.718 rounds to 7.2 and 0.787 rounds to 7.9. Okay, so this is my confidence interval. Okay, now I had, what was it, 452 out of 600 said they were going out. That's 0.75. 0.75 is in that confidence interval. If it's in that confidence interval, that means we retain. Okay, so let me tell you what your paragraph will look like now. It says, based on this sample, we can be 95% confident that the true proportion of people going out on Valentine's Day, remember it has to be in context, is between 72% and 79%. Therefore, we retain our null hypothesis because 0.75 is in this confidence interval. So, here's how you would do the second part for this. Like I said, the first two have not changed. My null and alternate are still the same. Here's our problem, null and alternate. My conditions are still the same. But this time, instead of finding a p-value and stating my conclusion with a p-value, I am finding a confidence interval. And because my value fell within that confidence interval, that means that we are failing to reject, so we're retaining the null hypothesis. Notice, I got the same answer. Here, we could not say that more people were staying home. Here, I could not say that more people were staying home. Doesn't matter which method you use, you're going to get the same answer. I personally just like to check both. I want to make sure my p-value is where it's supposed to be and my confidence interval is where it's supposed to be. That way I know that I did it right. Okay, they're not contradicting each other. But whichever way makes the most sense to you is fine. I have to teach you both ways because sometimes they ask you to do a p-value and sometimes they ask you to do a confidence interval, and I need you to know how to do both in case they specifically ask you. However, most of the time, they don't specifically ask you. In this problem we did, I know I got a lot of papers up here, sorry. It did not tell me how to solve it. I got to pick, okay? It just told me how many people they thought were going out for Valentine's Day. I told them how many were in my survey, and then we did the math for it, okay? So, recap. To solve these problems, you need a null and alternate. You need your conditions in context. If they're not in context, you don't get full credit. You are either doing a p-value or a confidence interval. It does not matter. When you write your conclusion, you have to state if you rejected or retained your null. Doesn't matter. You have to state the p-value or confidence interval. This is why you rejected or retained. Okay? And you have to put it in context of the problem. So guys, I hope this helps you for solving these. If you have any more questions, please let me know. I'll see you guys later.